What is this Kubernetes architecture, how the Kubernetes works, what are the things we need to know regarding the Kubernetes architecture. So the first and for most important thing is, so we have two types of servers in Kubernetes. One is the master and another one is the worker node. So the master components is nothing but your API server, your kube scheduler, the controller manager and etcd, and your worker components is nothing but your kubelet, kube-proxy. So what is this, Mudasir? Why you're telling this? We will discuss. So this is how the things will look like if you see the Kubernetes cluster from the top floor of Burj Khalifa. If you go to first floor and see the Kubernetes cluster, so this is how the things will look like. So if you want to interact with Kubernetes cluster, you can go with UI, you can go with CLI, both are fine. And these are the four important components required for the API server. So these are the four components. It need to be there on the master node, master server on the control plane. Then only we call that server as master. So first, the API server, the scheduler, the controller manager, and the etcd. So these are the four components: API server, scheduler, controller manager, and etcd. On worker, on minions on the worker node, we can have pods, pod, pod, and these are the three components required. First one is the CRI, whether it is a Docker, whether it is a containerd, whether it is a cryo, any CRI is fine. So with that, we need kubelet and kube-proxy. So these are the components which making your Kubernetes cluster stable. So these are the components which offering you to manage your application with all production grade features. So first, let's talk about what is the job of Kube API server, what is the job of Kube scheduler, what is the job of Kube controller manager and its CD. And so now let's talk about the first component. Let's explore the first component, that is Kube API server. The API server is the grand central station of Kubernetes cluster. All communication between all components must go through the API server. It is very important part of Kubernetes cluster. If he is down, the whole Kubernetes cluster is down. So the Kube API server is like, maybe you can think of he like a watchman, he is like a gatekeeper, and every communication must and should go through the API server, the creation of your application, management of your application. So everything is taken care by Kube API server, and he will help you with a lot of features like authentication, whether you have all the correct certificates or not. If you have, then he will authorize you to deploy your application, and request validation, what you are writing, that is right or wrong, so that can be deployed or not. So what is the error, in which line you have error, all the stuff, it will, the things, those are the things were taken care by API server. And also it will help you in mutation and admission control, the governance, to manage, to have good governance at the cluster level, to maintain the standards, what you can deploy, what you can't deploy, from where you can pull the images, from where you can't pull the images. All the stuff is taken care by API server in the basic layman term. So the main job of Kube API server is he is like a gatekeeper, and the authentication, authorization, the request validation, the mutation and admission control is taken care by the Kube API server. This is very important component. Okay, so the second component is kube scheduler. So the kube scheduler, so because the Kubernetes cluster in form of cluster, so how you will know where to schedule your application? Maybe you have 100 node cluster, you may have 1000 node cluster. How you will know maybe what is the requirement for your application. So where you can run your application, on which server you can run your application without any interruption. So just add what are the things required, what are the things required for your application, what are the resources based upon RAM, based upon CPU, based upon the port availability. Just tell Kubernetes. Inside the Kubernetes, there is a guy called Kube Scheduler who will help you to find a matching node to run your application, to schedule your application. And he's the guy who is responsible to find a matching node or to schedule your application based upon your requirement. So to run your application without any interruption. So that is the job of Kube Scheduler. Okay, fine. So this is maybe the Kube Scheduler. And the third important stuff is, the important component is Kube Controller Manager. So the Kube Controller Manager in Kubernetes, so if you remember, we discussed regarding the Kubernetes will provide self-healing property, the Kubernetes will provide scaling property. So he's the guy who will manage all those stuff. So he will maintain your application state, your cluster state based upon your desired state. So according to requirement of Shantanu, Shantanu want to maintain 10 replicas of his application. There is a requirement. He need to ensure 10 replicas of his application to be running at any cost in the cluster. So how you will? One way is he need to deploy the 10 replicas, and he need to watch the cluster, and he need to set the alerts. Hey, somebody, if something happened to my application, just send me an email or just alert me, just have one text message. Maybe some pods goes down at 3 a.m. as well. The Shantanu need to wake up at 3 a.m. and he need to ensure 10 replicas. But in Kubernetes, if you request that stuff to controller, hey, the controller, the Kube Controller Manager, so at any cost 10 replicas of my application to be running. So you need to ensure that stuff. In that scenario, the Kube Controller Manager automatically start one loop. Hey, the Shantanu has requested, how many are there? 10. Everything is fine. He has requested the start that the desired state is 10. What is the current state? 10. Everything is fine. What is the desired state? 10. What is the current state? 10. Everything is fine. What is the desired state? 10. What is the current state? 5. So 5 pods got crashed, and they are not working. So in that scenario, what the Kubernetes will do, the controller manager will do, automatically he tried to add how many pods, how many applications? 5 applications to maintain the desired state. So you don't have to wake up at 3 a.m. to deploy those 5 applications to check what happened. So automatically he will ensure those number of replicas. So that is the job of Kube Controller Manager. And the last piece of master puzzle is etcd. So in Kubernetes, it is the only stateful part of your master node. So this is where all the information regarding your cluster will be persisted. So the etcd will act like a database to hold your Kubernetes. So all the stuff the etcd will take care. So etcd will have all the information regarding how many users we have in the cluster, how many pods are running, how many applications are running, how many nodes we have, and what are the IP addresses of those nodes, and where is your application running on node 1 and node 2. So how many users we have: Shantanu, Hari, Rajesh, Mahesh, Manoj, Mudassir, and what are the roles they have. All the stuff will be persisted inside the etcd. It going to persist only the cluster information, not your application information. So it acts like a database to your whole Kubernetes cluster. All the information regarding your cluster will be persisted inside the etcd. Okay, so this is regarding the etcd part. So this is the short story of the master component. So we need all these components to be running on the master node, and so this is the short story of your components. And so we have worker nodes. On the worker nodes as well, we need these three components to be there: the kubelet, the kube-proxy, and your container runtime interface. So what is this kubelet? So what is this kube-proxy? And what is this CRI, container runtime interface? So the first and for most important thing is the guy name is kubelet. So he's a star of the show. Don't underestimate him. So he's a star of the show on every node. So he need to be there. This need to be this service to be running on every node, and then only your node will be in healthy state. If he is absent, the meaning of that is your node is unhealthy. So if you have 100 node cluster, how many kubelets we need there? So the kubelet is the star of the show on every node, and he acts like a node agent. And the main job of kubelet is he is responsible to manage your application on that particular host. So he's the guy who is responsible to manage your application on that particular node, and all the management regarding your application is taken care by the kubelet. If something happened to your application, he's the guy who will tell Kube API server, hey API server, there is a problem with some application, so please look into that. So he's very, very important on every node. The second component is the CRI, whether it is Docker, whether it is Containerd, whether it is Cryo, whether it is RKT, any CRI. The CRI, so container runtime interface. So this component is responsible. It acts like a container factory. So the main job of CRI is, okay. So the main job of CRI is PCG. PCG stands for P for pull an image, C for create a container, and G for give back to kubelet. So P for pull an image, C for create a container, G for give back to kubelet. So the only job of CRI is, so the Docker is to do a job of PCG. It acts like a container factory, pull an image, create a container, give back to kubelet. So next, everything is taken care by your kubelet, assigning managing with self-healing property. So all the stuff is taken care by your kubelet. And the last piece of node puzzle is kube-proxy. So if you remember, we talked about something, hey, in Kubernetes, you don't require any load balancer. The load balancing is taken care by Kubernetes itself. So that's where the kube-proxy comes into picture to solve the problem of the networking stuff, the load balancing. So this component is responsible to manage your network rules on each node, and help you to forward, to load balance, to distribute your traffic in between your applications. So that job is taken care by kube-proxy.
Well, this was our export, and thank you so much for staying with us till the end of the video. Now all you have to do is just click the link in the description below, or if you are just starting out, just type k21academy.com/K8S02 and you will be redirected to a page like this. Now all you have to do is your enter name, enter email ID, enter phone number, and click on register now. That's how our thank you page looks like. You can add this to your Google Calendar or Apple Calendar, and I promise this is something that you don't want to miss. So go ahead, click on the link and step into the world where learning knows no boundaries. Till then, keep enjoying. I'll see you in the next video.